Chicago is known for being a super neighborhood-based city. Some neighborhoods have been around since Chicago was incorporated, some were added later on, but construction has begun on a new neighborhood in one of Chicago's most popular areas. So let's take a look at what eventually will become Lincoln Yards. If you're not from Chicago, your biggest question is probably, what is Lincoln Yards? And if you are from Chicago, your biggest question is probably, is it ever getting built and why is it taking so long? And I will be answering both of those questions. Starting with what is Lincoln Yards. So we know Lincoln Yards is going to be Chicago's newest neighborhood. It's being developed by Sterling Bay, and if we go to their website, we can see their vision is to breathe fresh life into a former industrial site in Chicago's North Branch corridor, bringing new and improved infrastructure and transportation, businesses and residences, parks and open spaces and other amenities to create a vibrant mixed-use community where Chicago can connect. And if you don't know, mixed use just means it's going to include a mix of commercial and residential spaces. If you're not from Chicago and you're not familiar with the location of where they're building this, let's take a little look at a map, okay? In my last video, I talked about Lakeview, Lincoln Park, and Bucktown. Those are three of Chicago's most popular and populous neighborhoods. We have Lakeview here, and then we have Lincoln Park right next to it, and then Bucktown and Wicker Park over here. And there's nothing currently between those areas, and I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. There's over 50 acres of riverfront land here, which is where they're, of course, building this new neighborhood. Historically, this has been a really industrial area and has been owned by the A. Finkel & Sons Steel Company, so there's not a whole lot over here currently other than commercial and retail spaces, a little bit of residential, but Chicago was once a massive industrial hub, especially for steel. And because this area primarily used to be a steel yard for over a century, there were a lot of environmental concerns that needed to be addressed before building could start. They announced the project about 6 years ago and have been working ever since on getting the site cleaned. So they've spent about $10 million and 6 years getting the area prepped and decontaminated and ready to build on. So here's a look at the area currently. It's obviously really ugly right now because it's winter, it's a giant construction site, so there's not much to see, but this Clybourne Bridge has one of the best views of the city, and this gives you a chance to see what this area looks like before it becomes a fully built out neighborhood, which I actually think is pretty cool. And this is actually a rendering image, and I don't think the scale is necessarily correct with how close the Sears Tower is in this image, but if they really are designing these buildings to keep a window to the skyline, I think that'll be really cool. So now that it's ready for public use, what are they bringing to this area? The project will include up to 14 million square feet of new commercial and residential construction, including up to 6,000 residential units, 21 acres of public open space, and multiple infrastructure and transportation improvements. This is going to be really important for this area. Obviously, with an increase of people living in this area, working in this area, they need better roads and bridges to make sure that they can accommodate for this increase in population. So among the transportation improvements, they'll be extending the 606 trail, which currently runs from Humboldt Park through Logan Square and ends in Bucktown. The 606 is Chicago's version of the High Line in New York. It used to be railroads, but it has been transformed into a park and walking trail. Like I mentioned earlier, Chicago was a steel hub, a big railroad hub, and as time went on and they were utilizing the railways less frequently, people started to come together to discuss how to turn the Bloomingdale rail line into more green space. So we've talked a lot about Bucktown in this video. Right next to Bucktown is Logan Square, and in the 90s, Logan Square had the least amount of open space per capita of any neighborhood in Chicago. So the idea for the 606 was born in the early 2000s and officially opened in 2015. It's called the 606 because Chicago's zip codes all start with 606. So now we have this 2.7 mile trail of green space, walking and biking, and it's truly a joy. I personally love the 606. So their plan is to extend it about a half a mile into the Lincoln Yards project. So it currently ends here at Walsh Park, and it's going to somehow cross under the expressway and end here at a new transportation hub called the Link. Very creative, very punny with Lincoln Yards. For additional transportation improvements, they're rebuilding the Clybourne Metro stop and maybe adding another Metro stop. I couldn't find a whole lot of information on this, so I'm not sure if that's set in stone or not, but the trains in this area are pretty non-existent other than this Metro stop. The closest CTA stops are the Blue Line at Damon, the Red Line at North and Clybourne, and the Armitage, Brown, and Purple lines. So I do think that it's something that the city needs to figure out, which I also mentioned in my previous video, but I'm not exactly sure if all of those plans have been ironed out yet. What they're lacking in trains, I guess they're trying to make up for with water taxi stops. So currently the water taxi runs from North Avenue south to Chinatown, with the southernmost stop being at Pingtom Park. And obviously this mode of transportation is weather dependent. They don't run in the winter, but it's definitely the most fun mode of transportation. So I guess it's good that they're adding a few stops here. The further north stop looks like it's going to be at Webster, which is a little less than a mile north of North, which is currently the northernmost stop. Here's another rendering image, and you can see obviously the yellow water taxis here on the river. They're also going to be adding 2 new bridges, which is going to be absolutely necessary with an increase of congestion in the area. The bridges we have now just aren't going to cut it. So here's a little map. You can see that they're building out a road that currently ends here and is going to extend down over the river. They're also going to be building out the Riverwalk, which is really exciting because I personally have been loving what Chicago has done with the Riverwalk throughout my lifetime. It's truly such a fun and beautiful place to hang out. And as you can see in some of the renderings, you'll be able to pick up kayaks and have a nice area to take walks, which I am here for. So now those of you who have been driving past the billboards and the site on a regular basis may be wondering, when is this ever going to get done? I mean, they've been talking about it for over 6 years at this point. When is it going to become a reality? Like I mentioned, they had to start by cleaning and decontaminating the area, so that took years and millions of dollars to achieve. They've finally started construction, and the first building is already up at 1229 West Concord. It's called the Ally, and it's designed as a life sciences building, which will be used for medical research and lab space. And there are 3 phases of the project, and you can see we're here with the Ally on Concord. So if everything goes to plan, it looks like they're shooting to be done with like construction and building in 2025, and then maybe starting to open everything in 2026, which feels pretty ambitious to me, but time will tell. I'm actually very excited to see how it turns out. It's obviously been a controversial decision. There's a lot of chatter on both sides on whether this is going to be good for the city or not, but I haven't seen a fully new neighborhood built in my time, so I'm more curious than anything to see how it turns out. There is another neighborhood also in development called the 78, which is going to be near the South Loop of Chicago, which I will be making a video about as well. So if you have any questions about that, let me know, and subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss that video when I post it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye! If you've ever dreamed of living in a luxurious apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and incredible views, this video is for you because today we're touring an $11,000 a month penthouse rental apartment in Chicago.